It is no secret that most churches have a very difficult time reaching those of young adult age. Josh McDowell recently stated that if a young person does not accept Christ by the time they are 12, they have only a 4% chance of accepting Him over the rest of their lifetime. And we've been looking at the concern I've called failing faith foundations in our youth, and why the seeds of faith we are sowing in our young people are often not able to withstand the onslaught that our culture throws at them. We are fortunate to have a brand new Canadian study called Hemorrhaging Faith: Why and When Canadian Young Adults Are Leaving, Staying, and Returning to the Church. As I said yesterday, the contents of this report are so shocking that parents and pastors of every church in Canada need to understand what is going on. You may want to go to your own phone even now and place a call to your pastor suggesting they tune in to 100 Huntley Street. Hemorrhaging Faith is an important study on the future of the church in Canada. Yesterday we looked at the findings of the report, and today I want to concentrate on the implications for families and churches. With me again today are James Penner, Rick Hiemstra, Rachael Harder, and Dave Overholt. Thanks again for joining up with us on 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you.
James, you are an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Lethbridge, trained by Reg Bibby. And Reg Bibby and Don Posterski were veterans, really, in bringing to bear our working knowledge of young people in Canada. Yes. Do you remember the history? How far back do they go with those?
1984 was the first Project Teen Canada survey. Another one was done in 1992, another one in 2000, another one in 2008. So Don started out with Reg, and Reg has continued that. We have a quarter century of teen trend tracking because of the work started by those two.
And of course that investment so important because the milestone markers of trends from a research point of view are critical. And Rick, you direct research for the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada and have been part. Can you tell us again, just remind our viewers of where this report came from? Who are the partners or who brought it together?
Well, the EFC has a ministry partnership called the Youth and Young Adult Ministry Roundtable, and Dave, one of our other guests here today, is a part of that. And they essentially got together and said, what research do we need? And one of the questions was, why aren't there more young adults in church? Where are they going? Why are we losing them? And so they commissioned this research, and some of us were part of that study.
And Rachael, you're from Lethbridge, and but born in Calgary, I understand. So you find yourself in Lethbridge as a pastor to young adults in the church.
Yes.
Why?
Because it's a generation that really needs to be reached. It's a generation that has largely been neglected or ignored, not purposefully, just has happened. And so I just have a real heart for that generation and just seeing them be engaged by the gospel and to have their lives transformed.
And you've worked on this research project as a sort of a second role?
Yeah. So in addition to being a young adults pastor, which I would say is the very practical side of things, I also took on this research project where I now understand it from a national level as well.
Great. And Dave, pastor in Hamilton, Ontario, you've been at your church for how long?
15 years.
So 15 years, and you're known to be a pastor of, in a sense, an emerging generation church.
Yes.
Describe it.
Yeah, we grew out of 6 youth groups that came together. And so we're just trying to figure out how to do cross-generational ministry with a real target towards this next generation. And we're trying to figure that one out. And it's fun to see the generations cross and still have a lot of young adults come and enjoy and take part in church.
So as we come back to the study then, could we just summarize the finding if anyone wasn't watching yesterday? And you've really taken young people who were committed attenders, regular attenders of church life, and then had a look at them later on in their lives and to see what happened. What are the key findings that we should know?
One thing that I want to highlight is 30% were occasional attenders and 70% were monthly or more. And what we did now was we looked at them and did something called a cluster analysis, whereby they fall into 4 categories now. One is called an engager, which means they love church, they're engaged in their faith. Another is fence sitter. That category is 36%, and they want church but on different terms. We have another group called wanderers, 26%, who say, I've found a way to make life work without church. And then we have 15% rejectors who say, church is bad. Something's happened in my church experience where I don't think it's valuable for anyone.
And then I read in your report a concept that was called radical autonomy. I remember from Postursky and Bibby's research somewhere, I think in the late 80s or 90s, where the driving force in a young person's life before then was friendship, which really accounted for the peer pressure syndrome. And something changed, where freedom to choose became the #1 driving force in their lives. This radical autonomy, Rick, what do you make of it, and how does it play into what we know about young adults?
Well, young adults today experience life as a far less friendly, less stable place than previous generations. So family breakup is higher, job situation is more tenuous. And essentially, it's a generation that feels that there's no one in their corner. And so if there's no one in your corner, what you try to do is carve out a life where you control the variables. Because if no one's going to fight for you, I'm going to fight for myself. So I want to be radically autonomous. I want to be able to make the decisions in my life and control things because I've got no church community or anybody else looking out for me. And that's how they structure their lives. And so they don't trust the communities to be in their corner for them. That's what they want, my control for my life so that I can make good things happen for me.
And Rachael, in a sense, a young person's experience with God can be very different than their experience within church life. Tell us about that and how it impacts the thinking of this generation you're working with.
Yeah, that's really important, Don. What we see is we see the emerging generation, they're reporting that they love Jesus, but not so much the church. And so what this is reflective of is the fact that young people are not finding congregations that are vibrant and alive with this faith that delivers hope and life and future purpose, calling, etc. Instead, they're often finding congregations that are just trying to keep it together. Sometimes there's abuse of authority within these congregations. There's a need for manipulation and control within these congregations. And so young adults are stepping back and saying, we're not interested in that. We actually really want to know the real Jesus. And so they're starting to step out and exit the church, hence Hemorrhaging Faith.
Right.